and state governments seem to have one first response to any protest or contentious issue: shut the internet. As we speak, there is no internet connection in Jammu and Kashmir, large parts of the northeast, Aligarh and Saharanpur today, where there are protests against the CAB. It's almost become a standard operating procedure, which is why we are called the capital of shutdowns. According to a report by Freedom House, India topped the list of shutdowns among 65 countries they surveyed, with over 100 internet shutdowns in 2018. The reasons are public safety or national security. But is this the only way to curb violence? And when does this preventive action become excess? Speaking to me on this now are Pranesh Prakash, affiliated fellow at Yale Information Society Project, and Pavan Duggal, president cyberlaws.net. Essentially two people you should listen to if you want to figure out government policy and the internet. Welcome to both of you. Pranesh, let me begin with you and let me take the counter view. Now, in a situation like today, like what we've seen in Assam, in Guwahati last couple of days, if you were in charge, would you not have shut the internet?
Absolutely not, because without access to the internet, essential facilities such as access to medical care becomes more difficult. Police functioning becomes more difficult. Running of government becomes more difficult. So shutting down the internet is absolutely the wrong response. And indeed, it hampers the right kinds of responses. If the government isn't able to actually control what's happening on the streets, even though it has police battalions and indeed army going from other parts of the country to the northeast and to Assam, then I don't see how shutting down the internet is actually helping any at all, because people are out on the streets. People aren't gossiping amongst each other. They aren't spreading misinformation over social networks and so on. They're actually on the streets protesting. So how is this supposed to help? This is just like, for instance, the situation where in places like Rajasthan, you have internet shutdowns because exams are happening and people don't want students to cheat. Well, shutting down the internet for a whole lot of people, for everything, isn't actually going to help in these kinds of situations. It's a disproportionate response, and it harms what you're trying to do, and it harms freedom of information and expression.
You know, it's an important point, and it's an important point, and especially since we are focused on digital India, right? We're focused on getting digital access to every part of the country. A lot of our startup boom has happened because of internet connections in remote places. But Pavan Duggal, if you look at it in a broader picture, and we're showing you the reports from Freedom House, etc., we seem to be the most quote-unquote trigger-happy when it comes to shutting down the internet. Now, some of the times is because, you know, there are videos going around showing some fake kidnappings, and then people lynch whoever they see standing on a street corner. And it's a difficult decision. But why do you think this is the go-to response?
This is the go-to response by the government because they believe this is the most easiest things to do, without realizing that an internet shutdown is going to prejudicially impact not just governance, but could also even tomorrow impact people's confidence and trust in the ability of the state to govern, and could have much bigger, larger long-term consequences. I believe in today's world, when across the world it's been well stated that the right to the internet is part of your fundamental rights or human rights, merely shutting down of internet on the ground of some public exigency or not is not really going to help. It's time that governments will have to start coming up with more innovative, creative strategies to deal with these law and order problems. Yes, on a legal standpoint, I can't doubt the government. The government has the power under the Information Technology Act 2000 for blocking, for closing down the internet. However, that power has only to be exercised in certain limited circumstances. But because of the nature of the clauses that are given under the IT Act, they are so subjective and so vast that just about any kind of a situation could be brought within the ambit of this kind of wordings. So I think the governments have to quickly realize, keep in mind the Twitter revolution that took place in Egypt. And if you're going to keep on shutting down the internet very frequently, there's going to be a huge popular uproar that could potentially impact governance per se. So think differently, think creatively, and think innovatively of how to deal with real world problems rather than cutting down the internet connectivity pipe.
No, I mean, it's a good point, but those aren't specific options. And I know that you're on the side of the story where you don't have to give specific options to the government. That's their problem. But frankly, let me come back to that. When you say think differently, think innovatively, what are you going to do in a situation like that, which very quickly tends to go out of hand? I'm going to take that question back to Mr. Duggal. In some cases, it seems excessive. Maybe in a lot of cases it impacts other people who are not involved in the protest, because you can't do it individually, right? You sort of put a blanket ban over the internet in a certain area. What are the options though?
Well, you have to quickly realize that this internet shutdown is a medicine that could be effective in certain cases. But if you're going to give the same medicine to a variety of ailments, it may stop having its long-term effect and people may start getting more disillusioned. Of course, if there's an immediate public order situation or a riot situation, obviously by curbing down the internet communication, you are helping to prevent the further dissemination of either fake news or ventilation of public grievances. So to that extent, for a short period of time, it's fine. But if that short period of time starts going into weeks and months, then I think it's time for us to realize that we have to come up with more approaches. Please understand, people want the access to the internet come what may. And if you are disenfranchising them by cutting off the internet, the kind of pushback that you're likely to get from people is going to be far more long stretched and far more severe. I don't have exact answers of what kind of creative approaches. Yes, the government will have to keep on resorting to these shutdowns of the internet, but not every case would warrant an internet shutdown. Yeah. You will have to now come up with more on the ground, real situations of taking people into confidence, trying to diffuse the situation rather than saying, look, there's a problem, let's close our eyes, let's cut the internet. We need to be more different.
No, and it doesn't necessarily always work. Like we've seen in Assam right now, it hasn't stopped people from coming out necessarily. Pranesh, would you like to add insights to why governments in India, and this is central and state governments, very often use this tactic? Why do they use this as the first mode? And for example, in Kashmir, now you've had no internet for months. After several claims that things have returned to normalcy, then why let people who are not indulging in these protests, etc., suffer?
The simple answer is because the government doesn't care about their suffering. People are dying because there is no internet, because they don't have access to the transplants which they get for free under Ayushman Bharat, because those can't be registered into the healthcare system. So people are literally dying because of lack of access to the internet. And yet the government says that there is a greater need to save lives. Well, you're killing people by not having, providing access to the internet, by cutting off that access. So this doesn't, you're doing far worse by cutting access than what you're seeking to prevent. So it's just that the government is thoughtless. And for instance, 4 UN special rapporteurs all got together in a joint statement, condemned internet shutdown in Jammu and Kashmir. And yet that hasn't changed the government's opinion. Indeed, last year, the Pakistan Supreme Court struck down the provision for internet shutdown in Pakistan and called them unlawful, unconstitutional. In India, our Supreme Court hasn't yet done so, and in fact, there hasn't been a single case that they've heard on merits on internet shutdown so far. And for me, when you see on CCTV cameras, police people going into a newspaper office and beating up people in a newspaper office, that shows that what they're trying to curb is not the dissemination of some kind of disinformation or fake news or things like that, but they're actually trying to curb freedom of expression. Now, this, again, let me point out, can be counterproductive, because if people are able to vent their frustration and anger online, they're actually less likely, perhaps, to go out onto the streets to vent that anger. As editor from the Maldives once put it, every negative comment I allow on the website is one less stone thrown at my office. And so, which is his justification for why negative comments should be allowed and these kinds of expressions should be allowed, because they actually help prevent violence. The government doesn't seem to have that view. The government, in fact, seems to have the opposite view of shutting down even legitimate newspapers and beating up news persons,
Right.
and cutting down access to information to real information
Yeah.
for
No,
every.
but I think what you're speaking about is a very specific sort of censorship and clampdown. But when you shut the internet, you shut everything off. And as you mentioned, Pranesh, you shut off access to government schemes. You shut off access to information for your business. You just shut everything down. In this day and age, it's not as simple as, you know, not being able to watch your favorite program on an app. It's really cutting off your lifeline. So hopefully we will see less rather than more shutdowns in the new year as we end 2019. I want to thank both of you for joining us on this very interesting conversation on the India development debate. I'm taking a very short break, but don't go anywhere. Coming up next, the big debate on the Citizenship Amendment Bill. While the government's busy putting out fires in the northeast, are there diplomatic hurdles ahead which were perhaps unforeseen? We're discussing that on a day when Shinzo Abe has had to postpone his visit, defer it, actually, because he was supposed to come to Guwahati, where the protests have really been violent. The Bangladeshi foreign minister has cancelled his trip to India. There have been some statements from the US State Department. What do we make of all of this? I'm talking about that when we come back. We're also doing a UK election check. We're telling you about the FASTag. All of that when we return. Don't go away.